With 13 ABC Action News anchor Lee Conklin. First, with what's happening behind the headlines. And Take 3, our panel of political analysts.
And good morning, everyone. Welcome into another edition of Conklin and Company. Today on the program, we're going to veer from the norm a bit. We take it on the road to an area unfortunately linked to one of the most terrible crimes our city of Toledo has seen in recent years, the gang-related shooting at the Moody Manor Apartments last August that resulted in the death of one-year-old Keandra Hooks and the wounding of her sister, 2-year-old Leandra. That and other gang crimes prompting our media partner, The Blade, to put together a comprehensive 3-part series on gang life in Toledo. It's called Battle Lines. Crime reporter Taylor Dungeon and I went to Moody Manor this past week to talk about it.
Gang violence in Toledo, and all violence, I guess, more specifically, has been such an issue in this city for the last several years. In 2011, there were 210 shootings. The next year, we had 199 shootings. And so we're really trying to understand why there is so much violence in Toledo. And you're absolutely right. The Moody Manor is notorious in the city for being associated with gang violence. And in this particular area, we have the Manor Boys and some of their subset gangs. And they don't necessarily live in the Moody Manor, but they associate themselves with this housing complex because maybe this is where they grew up. This is maybe where their parents still live. Now they live on the streets around here, really from like Franklin and Vermont all the way up into the north end, like Sherman and Page Street, and they all claim the Moody Manor as home, really.
What prompted the Blade to do this piece or this series? Because we hear about gang violence, but we also hear about other incidents or other crime rates that are going down in Toledo. But gang violence per se, is that actually going up? What'd you find?
In 2011, gang violence was the leading cause of homicides in Toledo. In 2012, it was the second leading cause behind domestic violence. We're really trying to understand why gangs exist, why these young people become involved in gangs, why, if they know that this lifestyle can lead to pretty much one of two outcomes, prison or death, why continue to engage yourself in something that is so potentially harmful?
You actually talked with some gang members for this series. What did you find? What was the most telling aspect of the interviews that you conducted with these gang members, former gang members?
Geez, that's a good question. This is kind of normal behavior. I mean, this is what a lot of these young people grew up around. They're second or third generation gang members. Their father may have been in a gang, their cousins. They're all connected and they're all related, and this is what they grow up around. This is what they know. And so when we're living in that environment, if all you see is violence and you see the people who are making a lot of money and who are successful in the community are people who are in gangs, that's what you want to become. That's what you emulate.
What is successful in this community? I mean, you talk about making a lot of money. What's a lot of money? What is success?
It depends on who you ask. I mean, you take some of these things that you hear with a grain of salt. You know, I asked actually a member of the Manor Boys, how much money do you make? And he said there was a time right before his son was born where he was going out and, hitting licks, which is basically a term, to mean making a lot of money in a short period of time. Could be robberies, burglaries, anything that's going to earn you a lot of cash. And he said he made $34,000 in a weekend from committing various crimes. And whether, he doesn't have bank statements for me to check. So, I mean, you never know.
Did you get the feeling that any of them want out? That what we're doing is wrong? That this is not a good life? Or is it a matter of, well, I'm going to meet a violent end no matter what? What'd you find?
A lot of the people we talk to, the gang members we talk to, they're young fathers. Again, referencing the Manor boy that we met, he's 22. He has a 5-year-old son, and he said time and time again, my son will not be in a gang. I want to get out of the gang because I want my son to have a chance. I want my son to be in sports. I want him to be successful. I want him to have a good job. But at the same time, he would come right back around and say, but I can only leave the gang if my brothers and my cousins leave the gang. I can't, because if something bad happens to them, I can't just stand by and watch it happen. So it's really, they vacillate. They want out, but at the same time, it's so hard to leave the only thing you've ever known.
And do they feel threatened if they do leave? Are they threatened if they choose? Can they just walk away?
they'll tell you the only way out is death or prison, and really only death, because in prison or jail, I mean, the gang culture still very much exists. But at the same time, they also will tell you that if you get a legitimate job doing, if you're landscaping, if you're going to work, having any sort of like actual job where you're on a payroll, your friends aren't gonna harass you, and they're not gonna try and bring you down from that. Like they want to see you succeed, but at the same time, they still want you to ride for them if it comes down to it.
Taylor, I think a lot of people wonder, a young woman, a reporter coming into a situation like this, did you ever feel scared? You're talking to gang members, former gang members, people are watching you do this. Did you ever feel like, yeah, this is maybe not the most, this could be one of the more dangerous things I've ever had to do?
You certainly never know if you're walking into a volatile situation or not, and we had been warned of that before we started. People said, don't do it, you're going to get robbed, they're going to try and take advantage of you, something bad is going to happen. But you have to push all that aside. I mean, as a reporter, you have a job to do, and you have to be focused on the task at hand. And I think what made me feel comfortable in doing all this is all these people we spoke to had the option to not talk to us if they didn't want to. We can't twist anyone's arm. We couldn't force them to let us take their picture or give us their name if they didn't want to be involved. And frankly, a lot of these people were just so interested in sharing their story, because I think that the perception is that no one has ever been willing to listen to them before, and so that's what we wanted to do, is let them know that people were listening and wanted to understand.
As we talk to you today, this airs Sunday morning, and the first part of this series will be in the paper on Sunday. Was there something that came out of this 3-part series, 2 parts still to come, that surprised you about the people you met, the life that is the Moody Manor Boys, or the Manor Boys?
I think I've been covering crime in Toledo for 2 years, so I've had some exposure to these things beforehand, covering various shootings. I've written stories about gangs before, and covering the crime beat, I'm constantly working with people from Toledo Police. I think the thing that I found to be most startling was that even outside of the gang and gang culture is how little people understand or know what's going on in the city around them. There's like an entire subculture, an entire sub-city of Toledo that people really just have no idea exists, whether it's because they don't want to recognize it's there, or they don't know, because these things have never touched home for them.
We'll describe a sub-city. A sub-city that is a gangland Toledo.
Yeah, so like in gangland, so to say, they have their own economy, they have their own way of policing things essentially. So everything that we have in a normal I guess setting, these things exist, but they're all very underground. So underground economies being drug trades, various crimes like burglaries or car thefts. These are ways to make money. And the policing kind of goes back to the no snitching policy. They don't want things to be settled in court necessarily. Families will oftentimes push for no retaliation, but friends or fellow gang members will sometimes want to do that retaliation, because that, in their eyes, is the only way to have justice.
How'd you get inside this? Difficult for you to gain access? How did you do it?
It was
How'd you gain their trust?
It was very difficult, and part of the problem is the first assumption is that I work for Toledo Police. I am a police officer, and that is the first hurdle you have to cross, is trying to convince people that you are not a member of the Toledo Police Department. We spent a couple days just kind of driving around trying to talk to people, we being myself and Amy Voigt, the photographer, and no one wanted to talk to us. Everyone kind of blew us off completely, said, either they wouldn't acknowledge our questions or they just would walk away from us in general, say there are no gangs here, when we knew very well that there are. We got lucky with doing an interview with a man named Willie Knighton, who people will meet primarily in our day 2 story, who he's a former gang member. He spent 13 years in prison on a life sentence for murder, which he was commuted, and in 2009. And so he goes into prisons and correctional facilities now and works with fathers and gang members and tries to make them understand that they can live more productive lives once they're out. And so he was able to bring us inside of that, and because he trusted us, the gang members were willing to trust us, and they were willing to open up which was huge.
Did you, what type of resistance, if any, in doing the story, the series, did you get from TPD? I know there's dispute over maps of where the gangs are, what they're all about, but does TPD feel that you've compromised some of their investigations with some of the work that you've done?
TPD has, I think, been as helpful as they can be. They were not, people were told to not help us with the map, is what I've been told from my police sources. There were people who were still willing to help us, but only on the condition that they would remain anonymous, which of course we would always honor. Sure. But and they provide us with the statistics they have as far as number of gang-related shootings, an estimated number of gang members and gangs in the city. But as far as specifics go, there was really not that kind of discussion.
Work.
Absolutely.
And your own research.
Absolutely. And I think we're a better newspaper for having gone out and done this ourselves instead of relying on the police department's map. And we've shown the map to people who have knowledge of the police department's map, and they have said ours is better. So, I mean, it's interesting. But I mean, the story has been told so many times from a perspective of city officials and from the police that we really wanted to do something that we felt hadn't been done before, and that was to tell the story from the inside. That was so important to us, is to understand how these people are living their lives and how it's affected, and how, do you have to look over your shoulder every day and worry about rival gang members? I mean, how does your life different from mine? I mean, vastly different.
Did you come away from any of it understanding that these are gang members, but that person seems like there's a lot of potential? Seems like he could be a nice guy. Without being sympathetic, you have to be objective, but did you come away with some of that?
And that's so interesting, because a lot of these young, and just about everyone we spoke to is a young man. We talked to one young woman who's in a gang, but they all have so much leadership potential. I mean, they're not necessarily leading gangs, but they are involved in criminal activity that kind of requires a lot of planning and some thought behind it. And you think if you could take that and harness it and put it into, make them entrepreneurs of a legal business, how well they would do. And so it's just, that's just one thing that to me was frustrating. It's like, man, you could really do so much if you applied it to something in a positive way.
But so many, as you said, think the end is prison or death.
25 is considered a pretty significant milestone.
All right, Taylor Dungeon, thanks very much for giving us your time.
Thank you.
2 more pieces to come here in the next couple of days in the Blade. Thanks very much for joining us on Conklin & Company. Appreciate it.
Thank you.